Hi, I'm W.M. Hunt, Dill Hunt, and I'm here today to have a conversation with the wonderful photographer, Richard Renaldi, who's based in New York, as am I. And Richard has been shortlisted for the Prix Pictet for a project called, oh my God, Disturbed Harmonies, what's it called? Oh, thank God. And we're going to share that project with you as a kind of introduction to Richard. And you should know that Richard has at least 4 publications that are still in print. You can track them down. And a very lively presence online and as a teacher, and an all-around really, really good guy. I met Richard Renaldi when he did his first book, which was called Figure and Ground. Yes?
Yeah.
Oh, why don't you say something, Richard, so they know you can actually talk?
2006.
For Aperture. And they did another book a couple of years after that. Really, really good looking books. And then you took it upon yourself to actually self-publish one or two called, what's your address? Charles Street, Charles Press, Charles Allen.
Yeah,
it's called what? Charles Lee. Anyway, there's all over the years, not only with his books and gallery exhibitions, and he's had a couple. He's been he was in. He's a presence as a teacher, so I've run into him when we've been teaching at the same time. It's a real treat because Richard has lots of energy and students really like him, and he's very focused and that. So I have a nice long relationship with the and they afford me talk to people I like and who I think should be better known in the world. And so this is that opportunity to deliver a new audience to Richard Renaldi. So if you have questions as we go along, please put them in the Q&A box and then we'll deal with them at the end. Or if we get really tied down, we'll just answer them and say goodbye to everybody. So I've asked Richard to put together a little slideshow, as it were, on the project for Prix Pictet. One of the great mysteries, and maybe the answer to this will come forth today. We don't know who nominated Richard for Prix Pictet, and I think it's so wonderful that you've been shortlisted because you wouldn't be what's the theme of this one?
Human.
Well, it does make sense you were nominated because you are human and you like taking pictures of other humans. And so maybe it's more reasonable than I first thought. Richard, please talk.
Okay, just I want to make sure technically, can you hear me and see me okay?
Yes, I can. Maybe it's just you though.
No, there was a little moment where the network seemed to be shaky. Okay, so I'm gonna basically introduce this work by reading my artist statement, which I know isn't the most exciting way to present a body of work, but this is literally my first time publicly speaking about this work, and it's my most recent series and body of work, which I've been obsessively working on for about a year now, a little over a year. So I thought I'd do that.
Have to say that this body of work makes complete sense in terms of everything before it, because it's in a very sensible, thoughtful arc. Yeah,
it's the arc. So I'm gonna start to share my screen, and let's do that.
Take it away.
All right. Okay. Let's see.
This is plunged us into darkness.
Are we there with the title?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. So I'll start here with me, a self-portrait, using myself as a example of how all across the earth men are troubled. Economic and political power have failed to assuage their anxiety. And physical strength offers only the illusion of protection. Although male supremacy was never foreordained either by history or biology, the obsessions of powerful men have haunted the past and reshaped the natural world. What is the source of this disquiet? Sorry, I went the wrong way there. Is it that men are more likely than women to commit and to suffer acts of deadly violence, to be conscripted into military combat, to be jailed, subjected to corporal punishment, or executed? Is it their lower life expectancy? Perhaps the scriptural mandate to have dominion over every moving thing upon the earth was a bit too much pressure. Modern biblical scholars working with newer, more accurate translations of the ancient Hebrew text have established that the term Adam, the first inhabitant of the garden, is not a proper noun, but rather a generic gender-neutral word meaning human. Yet centuries of mistranslation abetted a tilt in men's favor. And then there is the terrible violent sexual mythology found in Genesis 3:16, in which blame for the loss of Eden is unfairly pinned on the female. And quoting from the King James Bible, "Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee." But new threads of archaeological and anthropological inquiry, as well as new ways of reading old data, have begun to reveal that male-dominated societies are relatively modern inventions. And the loss of paradise seems to have triggered an anger displacement syndrome from which proceeded millennia of burning, chopping, mining, damming, slaughtering, shooting, conquering, and otherwise disturbing the earth and its creatures. In 1864, at the height of the American Civil War, the American conservationist and diplomat George Perkins Marsh published Man and Nature, or Physical Geography as Modified by Human Action. He argued that there was impending danger in man's assumption that he had triumphed over nature. 5 years earlier, Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species had explained where humans had come from. Man and nature foretold where they were going. Marsh wrote that man was breaking up the floor and wainscoting and doors and window frames of our dwelling. 98 years before Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and over a century before Exxon scientists quietly proved the growing threat of anthropogenic climate change, and then invoked a silence to which they had no right, Marsh argued that man was the prime disturber of nature's harmonies. My photographs represent Marsh's disturbed harmonies. They express my desire to pull men back into parallel with the natural world, from which they had gone badly out of true. So these are the set that will be presented at the Prix Pictet in London later this month. And so each diptych is an equivalent, and every face an enigmatic globe whose geographies, histories, and political divisions challenge us to interrogate more fully their tectonic pressures. So I digress for a moment to put this work in the broader context of the arc of my artistic life. And when you look back at your work over many years, you start to notice there are themes that emerge and reemerge over and over again. And for me, those themes really involve relationships, intimacy, and connections. And so that's like ranges from personal relationships, like my parents' dysfunctional relationship to each other, and the relationship between me and my parents and my siblings, and then the relationships between me and my partners. So this work is from my most recent monograph in 2018 called I Want Your Love, which was a visual autobiography, or the connections and contrast between the wealthy class and the working class, as exemplified in one of my earliest bodies of works, Shoppers and Workers. Or between Hawaii and Alaska, exemplified from my project 49 and 50. Or the connections we have to other strangers, and my exploration of intimacy shared between sets of strangers in my 2014 monograph of same titled project, Touching Strangers. Or from revelers, from the revelers to the custodians, exemplified in Manhattan Sunday. That's my project on New York nightlife that was also published in 2016 by the Aperture Foundation. Or from my more recent series, Billions Served, exploring the connection between the servers to the patrons in the fast food industry. And then the relationship between me and my father in my most recent unpublished work, Emails to My Father. And then, of course, the relationship between us, humans, and our home, the planet Earth. And this is what led me to Disturbed Harmonies and the relationship between us and animals and the flora and fauna. And each and every living thing. So I hope that went well. I hope that went okay for everyone.
I think that you've married the artist statement and the slideshow very nicely, so I appreciate that. I'm always consistently pleased to see your portraiture because I think you have a real gift that, or real talent that you're able to put your people present themselves in a way that is lovely. They're kind of uncomplicated, and they seem to be at ease, and they don't seem to be frightened by the whole process of being captured. You do use, for people who don't know this, you use a big 8x10 camera, which is got to be intrusive in the most amazing, spectacular way. It's like showing up with a Volkswagen to take somebody's picture. Talk about, so the skill with the portraits is then charmingly met with your skill as a landscape photographer and someone who's working with flora now in this most recent project. So talk about how, first off, talk about the nature of diptychs, what's your affection for this format where it comes from, or anything about it.
I mean, I think that the project evolved. Last year, I was sort of in a bit of a personal crisis, and I was out in the field in Maryland with my View camera, and I ended up getting locked out on my hotel room balcony I had just checked into a hotel room in Ocean City, and I was finally able to get I called the front desk and it kept ringing and ringing and nobody answered. And so I finally was able to get the attention of some woman who was parking her car to get someone to help me. And finally someone came into my room and they were able to open the balcony room door. And this was this man, Vincent, who was a manager at the hotel. And Vincent and I, the next day before I was leaving, got to talking, and I found out that he was a war veteran from Afghanistan. And I kind of had courageously asked him if he had suffered from any PTSD. And he said he had, and we talked about that experience for him. And so then during this sort of period of vulnerability that I was experiencing in my own life, I started making other portraits of men, and I realized, and there was a certain openness that I approached these portrait sessions with, and I discovered a lot of men that had faced many challenges and problems in our conversation, and so when I started building this body of work of these portraits of men, and thinking about that trauma and that sort of collective challenges that these men I had spoken with faced, I wanted to somehow create something that was reparative, or in a way that would be prescriptive to kind of help address that in these pictures. And I finally figured out, I've been taking photographs for many years. I'm the kind of guy that takes pictures a lot. Like I'm not like, I only take pictures when I make my art. I take pictures when I go for walks, when I just I'm out doing stuff. I like to photograph all the time. I mean, not all the time, but a lot. And so I have this archive of pictures I've been making in my explorations of national parks, and just walking through forests and observing nature. And I've always noticed how delicate and beautiful nature is. So it felt like the right moment to take these pictures from nature and to put them together with these portraits of men, and to create these diptychs. And I started doing, I made a half dozen, and it really felt like, okay, this is definitely like something new for me, because I'd never worked in pairs like that before. And it really felt like it had resonance for me personally, but the people I showed the work to also felt like this was an interesting new direction. So I ran with it, and my challenge to myself then became to make 365 of those over the course of the year. And since last September 1st, I just completed, about 2 weeks ago, I finished my 365th diptych.
Congratulations.
And that last one I made is a self-portrait. So that also felt like it's part of that story for me as well.
Is it the self-portrait you showed of you on the hills?
No one's I won't show it until the end of showing the 365. So in about a year.
Have you picked what kind of flower you are?
I have, yes, I'm not a flower.
Okay. But then again, you say that, but you work in pairs a lot. You like the idea of people connecting, so that
right. I mean, it splits the pairs that are in a single image, and it divides them into two images. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, there's a funny that if people pursue your work and your career, they will discover that you have this ongoing project, which I find so beguiling. You and Seth, your partner, have been traveling through go to a new state every year and make a very funny photograph of the state line or whatever with like, you are now entering Oklahoma. And I think those are postcards from the world and postcards from America. And, you're picking, you can react to that, or I can just keep blathering on.
Oh no, yeah, those are, that series is called New Year's cards, and we actually literally send them out to people on my mailing list. And I can only shame the people that don't update me when they move, because they fall off the list, because if the card gets returned to sender. But I do email them to people, and then I post them on. But there's one a year. We do it every year at a different state line. And so we are now, this year will be our 24th state that'll go out in December. And that means we have to stick together for 26 more years, and also to live 26 more years to complete the project, because it's only one a year. So, and there's something about, I think we started when we were young partners or boyfriends. We like to take road trips, and it just kind of like fell into place naturally that this would be a nice way of sharing holiday greetings with a different state sign. And we both love the states. We were like really into geography as kids, and so I think it just, there's a personal aspect of both our collective love for like the American landscape, and going across these state borders. I always used to get excited when I was a little kid, like, woohoo, we're in a new state, and we would like honk the car horn. And so it's sort of also, there's a bit of memory and nostalgia attached to them as well.
There is a real lost boy school of photography in America that I adore. Alex South, and I guess Stephen Shore, if you want, Robert Frank, Todd Hideout. And one of those guys I was talking to once, and I think it was Todd Hideout, maybe it was Alex, said they just go to the airport and go someplace, and then rent a car and go drive around and see what's there to be found. I always like new places, and I'm always someone who does the double-decker bus tour, because I want to find out where everything is, so I don't get lost or miss something. Or
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you think there's much more to be mined out of that work, or do you think it's been so well covered? And I mean, it's also been covered.
Oh yes. Oh God. Yeah. I think anyone who has something fresh and personal to offer is certainly welcome, because that's, if it's new and it's thoughtful and it's deeply felt, it's going to be fantastic. So I like that. I like those pictures. I find myself seeking them, and I'm quite happy to see them. And I don't find them, it's funny, there's a Michael Cunningham thing I was going to read from one of the books that's has to do with that idea of being on the road. And I think that's what it's about.
You know, he wrote
later on. Talk about your training and your experiences, what informs the work. Who do you look at that is provocative, stimulating, or who you did look at when you were younger and moving along?
Just a quick sidebar about Michael Cunningham. He actually wrote the introduction to Fall River Boys, which was my second monograph about Fall River, Massachusetts. So that's really interesting. Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So
I do some homework.
So my training,
you're just winging these things, but actually I read a book or two. So yeah.
That's good. Well, my training, I started photography in high school, and I
Do
was,
the when question that I like, which is if photography changed your life, can you tell us when that happened? If there was a
I would say when I was a junior in high school, I was like supposed to take art as an elective, and the art class was full, and the art teacher, I went to a Jesuit high school, so my art teacher was Father Jim Vorwalt, and Father Vorwalt said, "Why don't you take photography?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't have a camera, but my sister does," and she lent me her camera, and um, like something happened where it was like this untapped talent or some sort of energy to be creative finally was able to like blossom. And because I was not an athletic kid, I wasn't very well coordinated, and also I got teased and called fag and stuff like that. I was very fashion forward in high school, um and this finally gave me confidence. I was like, oh, this is something that really gave me a sense of self-worth, and a good sense of self, and I loved it. And and the teacher, he created like an advanced placement photography for me to just keep doing it the rest of my high school, like the second semester junior and my full senior year. I was in the darkroom all the time, and I got involved with the school paper and all that stuff. And then I decided to apply to art schools, and I was like a B- student in high school, so I didn't have great grades. But I got into New York University on the like was sort of an exception because of the portfolio I submitted. They said, we should make an exception for this kid's lousy grades because he's good at photography. So
did you
um
interact with somebody there in person? Did you present the portfolio to?
no, I mailed it. And then I went to New York to visit schools, and I found out from admissions at NYU I got in, and I was with my dad, and he saw how thrilled I was, and he's like, my parents were very, very, very nervous, especially my mother, about me going to New York because it was 1986 and it was the height of the AIDS epidemic, and I had just come,
Weren't they?
yeah, I had just come out of the closet at my end of my senior year of high school. So my mom was terrified, like, of sending me to the village. And I was pretty naive, I was like a Chicago kid, but New York City was a whole nother level. But NYU was a great program, and I studied with Shelley Rice and Tom Drysdale and Elaine Mays. And I had a visiting artist, Larry Clark was one of my teachers, and he taught a semester at NYU. And he was really, I think he had a lot of influence on me because he pushed us to make like do a bunch of series of nude photographs, and that pushed me out of my comfort zone and got me to also ask like friends and dorm mates and stuff to pose naked for me when I was like only like 20 years old. And so I thought that was really like kind of prepared me for something later in life as far as my work. And Larry also, when I made my autobiography, I Want Your Love, I thought a lot about Tulsa and teenage lust, and definitely was inspired by that work going forward.
So it's a reasonable segue then to go into teaching, to talk about you as a teacher, because I have always been conscious of you being a presence in the teaching community in New York, and by extension, I guess, because everybody does workshops. And I've seen you teach, and you're great. You're so grounded. You're so generous. I know from myself as a teacher, I'm always intent on really getting into people and going like, respond, be here, show me what you want to do here. And so talk about teaching a little bit, will you?
Sure. I really enjoy it. I am not like I don't have an MFA, so unfortunately, I've only done 3 episodes of teaching at university level. I taught at Harvard for a semester, which was my first big teaching gig, and then at Cooper Union and Fashion Institute of Technology. And I really enjoyed those classes, but mostly I've been teaching at International Center of Photography as a part-time adjunct faculty there, and also leading workshops over the years. And I love like getting to be really intimate with a small group of students and just really sharing, and also like helping guide them, and then them it's like, I think teaching is like, I learn as much from my students as I hope they learn from me. And so I just like the whole, like, let's be vulnerable with each other, let's be critical and think together how we can make your work better. And guiding that process along is, I mean, it's really gratifying, and also challenging yourself to critique and talk about someone's work without being an asshole. Like that they, sometimes some people really need some help, and instead of tearing them apart, I like to think about, yes, let's deconstruct this. You need to be open as a student, though. You can't be defensive. If someone comes in defensive, that's a bad starting point. But most students are open. They're there because they want to learn. And I love like that like, okay, show me, or let's help make this better. And that's constructive, and that's like building something. And I think that it's in a way a legacy of what I can leave behind, is helping other people build up their work, and hopefully some of them will go on to teach, and it just becomes this continuum, which I think is also really lovely.
Tell me a story. You're going to collaborate with a former student coming up, yes?
Yeah. Brian Shootmott is going to be a visiting lecturer. I'm teaching a class with an organization called La Luz this fall. It's a really long 11-week workshop about a long-term photographic project. So and we invited Brian to come in and give a talk to the students, which is great because he took my class at ICP in 2007. It was I think my first or second time teaching, and Brian was one of my students then, and he's gone on to tremendous success and creating beautiful bodies of work. So yeah, that's lovely.
My takeaway from teaching was that it taught me it encouraged me to be articulate, to be specific, and to actually be honest. That if you talk from I learned a lot, and I owe my students a great deal for putting me in that situation. I love to see former students, if they've gone someplace, if they're serious about their lives, it's really, really fun and rewarding. And it's so funny because one of my students sent me a text earlier today ventilating about his boss, who's an old friend of mine. And I just thought it was so funny that he chose me to ventilate to, but that's fine.
But I think you really hit it about being honest. And I think you even have to be honest about what you don't know too, because obviously as you go through life, in some ways the part about getting older is you keep realizing how much you don't know. There's this infinitesimal amounts of information and knowledge, and that's just like, it just never, with living in the era we are, where there's just an onslaught of information, it's almost hard to navigate through everything that is out there. It's exciting at the same time.
Oh yeah, let's talk about age. That's really my favorite conversation. A question for you. is about the way in which you speak with people who are posing for you. Talk a little bit about how you find people. I love that you told me the other day that you're attracted to men, so that was a really good way of that was a good guide. But you don't photograph consistently, beautiful sexualized men. You photograph people who you, as the observer, you go like, Richard's seeing something here that's really special. So talk about how you get a model, what you say to the model, how do you get them to show up for a session, and then what the dialogue is to put them where you think they can be most comfortable or most accessible.
Yeah, I mean, my approach, I should also preface this, I don't only photograph with the view camera. I have a handheld digital camera that I use, a Sony A7R III right now, and I love that camera. And I mean, if it's strung around my neck and I'm walking around, like yesterday, I went to the beach in Chicago here, where I'm currently, and I decided to bring my camera with me, and it was a beautiful day. I waited till like the light was just really soft and lovely, and I just walked up to people and introduced myself, and I said, "Hey, can I make your portrait?" And most people say yes. I mean, I think I made a dozen portraits yesterday of different people, and I think only 2 people said no. And I mean, they're like, some people want to know what it's for. I'm like, to be honest, I don't even know. I'm like, maybe Instagram, maybe a project. I can't tell you yet, because this is what I do. And for some reason, people trust me. I don't know why.
Your big open face.
It could be my open face, or maybe I always say it's my tattoos, because it makes it seem like I'm somehow relatable, or I don't know exactly why people open up to me, but they do. And so when they do, it's my responsibility to honor that by making a good picture of them. So, and of course I don't always make a good picture, but I try.
Nonsense. Of course they're all good.
Yeah.
I had no idea. What
Can I
time is
just
it? My watch stopped. What time is it?
It's 12:38.
Oh, okay. Suddenly my clock said something.
We have
Good.
20.
There's a good question. Go to the Q&A. There's a question from somebody named Jonathan Alexander. Do you recognize that name?
Oh, transfer how? When most read versus.
So read it out loud.
Okay, Richard, this is from Jonathan Alexander. Richard is a fantastic teacher. Thank you, Jonathan. Transformed how I think of myself as extremely amateur photographer. What I most appreciated about Richard's teaching was his deep care for queer folks and his desire to create a safe space for queer artists. Question: does Richard see a resonance with that care for his teaching and a care for his photographic subjects? That's a good question. I do think there's a resonance, because I think it's just how I feel about human beings, and caring about my fellow humans, and wanting to show them respect. The one time sometimes I'm not the nicest guy is when sometimes on a customer service call, and I can get frustrated because you have to go through all those AI robot people before you could talk to a real person, and I arrive in the situation maybe a little frustrated. But in general, my partner always reminds me, you have to be nice to those people. I know. But to answer Jonathan's question, of course, yes. I mean, people deserve to be respected, and if they I think if we treat each other that way I think the world would be better. I mean, it might sound sort of naive, but I think that if you look at people as living, breathing human beings that have feelings, that have thoughts, that have anxieties, that have weaknesses and vulnerabilities, that you have to treat them with care, and that we should all treat either our students that way or our subjects. And that's why I was saying with making a portrait that I think that when someone says, yes, I can make, you can make my picture, then I want to respect that, because it's a gift. They've been very generous to allow me to capture the image of themselves. So I try my hardest to make it good and to make them, I don't know if everyone's going to be happy with how they look in my picture, because we are all very self-critical beings as well. But from my perspective, I just want to make something like of value from that experience. And hopefully, sometimes when I try and email or direct message my photographs of people to them, and hopefully they like them, but I don't expect everyone to like every picture I make of them. So, but at least from my perspective, I tried.
They seem terribly successful to me. And I told you that I really hate portraiture, so that's a really big deal. One of the observations that I shared with you that we can share here is that I think you have an uncommon respect for the piece of paper, for the square, for the rectangle. You look really good in a book. You really look good as a print on the wall. And I'll talk to photographers about why do their pictures have edges, because I want to challenge how they're thinking about it. What do you see it? But I think you see quite clearly in a portrait format, even the landscape and the flower pictures more than the landscapes. The landscapes have to be different because you never know how much. With the portraits, the color's always good. Your color is so accomplished relative to not being accomplished.
Thank you.
So that's just a compliment. I mean, you can react to it. Talk about the nature of the book and how you the pleasure you might receive from putting a book together, the edit, the whatever. Seeing your stuff in a book.
I love it. It's been a privilege to be able to have published my work, and the process of putting a book together is really exciting, especially editing and sequencing is really a wonderful challenge. And it's, for me, it's always been collaborative to work with an editor or a writer, and so I love that aspect, because usually when I'm out photographing, I'm 95% I'm by myself, and so when you go to then take that work and make it into something, it becomes a little bit more collaborative, and that experience is lovely. But also, like, the photography book itself, the objectness, the printing, the the covers, the materials, it's like textural. It's I think photography is really well suited for the book format, because it can be narrative, it can be anything, which is, I think, what we've learned in the last 10 to 15 years with this explosion of self-publishing and zines and DIY, photography. And so it's super exciting. And I like to have exhibitions, and I love making a beautiful exhibition print. But I think that the opportunities are a little, they're both hard to make happen, honestly. But for some reason, to me, the book is something that is can be seen in a public library, or it can be collected and kept forever, whereas a show comes down. A show always has to come down to make room for a new show, which is how it should be. But a book you can always have, and you can go back to it. I love the idea of a library and a collection, and I think books are really special, and I hope to be able to make more, down the road.
So the Prix Pictet project, have you talked to publishers about it? Are you waiting for it to marinate some more? You now are at 365. You think you'll make some changes in it?
All good questions. I think I will. I have been talking to some people. I have like 3 projects right now I want to publish. So it's a matter of like what would be best. And I think that Disturbed Harmonies would be smart to get that out in the next year or so, because the show is going to be traveling. There's going to be 2 exhibitions for the Prix Pictet that are traveling the world. So, and I think one of those exhibitions will come to New York City eventually too, which is exciting, at Photographica. So
it's up right now.
That's the Fire iteration, but Human will eventually.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So why I can't remember where your pictures were from Photographiska.
Yeah, Photographiska. So London is the first.
Today.
That's right. She was the winner in the last cycle. And I'll get to meet her in London. I'm really looking forward to that, because Sally Mann's work is one of my early favorite photographers. And when I met my husband, Seth, in 1998 at Rehoboth Beach in Delaware, I didn't know what he did, and he was a photographer. And so we spent the whole day together, and one of the things we talked about was photography, and we specifically remember talking about both being a fan of Sally Mann's work back then. So so that'll be really cool. I'm looking forward to that.
I think it's great, the company that you are keeping on the short list for Prix Pictet, because it's such a range of work and of photographers. So meeting those people will be stimulating and cool.
Oh, it'll be great. And I mean, what I love about, I think, the art world, and in specific the microcosm of photography, is that it's really a supportive community, and I think that I have some of my closest friends are my colleagues, and we build relationships as colleagues and as lovers of the craft, and so that feels so special for me, that I get to be a part of that community, and contribute, and both and also just engage with it.
The line I use about photography is that photography changed my life. It gave me one. And what I'm talking about is that not only is something that I like to pursue, to look at, to react to, it's stimulating, but it gave me a community of friends that all these other people out looking and hoping that what they're going to find is magical, because that's just the best thing in the world. If people have questions, they can send them in. I'm going to read the Michael Cunningham thing, because I think it's short and to the point and about you, and that's the point of the exercise. In Fall River Boys, which is really, your books are really good looking. They're done with care, and pictures look good, and text is thoughtful. So it's the foreword, and he says, part of what I love about photography, this is his voice, is that on one hand, it almost always implies a story of some kind, and on the other, always implies a story that's enigmatic and fragmentary, an illuminated piece of a tale, too vast for even the greatest of novelists, which by its perfect smallness implies something huge. So I think he's right on that. I love the idea that it's a big, heavy book. You could hear it fall on the floor. The seed that just explodes in your head is incomparable. Really, really, just I feel so blessed and lucky to have ended up in this weird place. I'm
glad you picked that quote. I love that quote.
It's sweet, nice.
Yeah.
Any advice for me? No, any advice for photographers?
Let's see. Well, I'll have to get back to you on the advice for you.
Okay, then we'll just put it on Facebook and everybody can read it.
Yeah, exactly. It's important to just make your work rather than think. I mean, I'm not the most strategic artist out there, but I think if you make really, really good work and your devotion and dedication is first and foremost to your art, then hopefully, the rest will follow. And that is, I think, where the focus should be is to making the best work you can and being vulnerable with that work and allowing other people to see it and to get feedback and to be open to feedback. And I think that's really, really helpful in like becoming a better artist. I mean, and certainly there's some innate talent or skill involved in this whole thing, and some people set out and make something and they're just really good from the start, and that's great. But I think it's also important to have to be both in the world as well as being inside yourself. Like, I think to connect your work to a broader audience means also being aware of what's going on in the world and being engaged and involved and being political, being active and aware, and then being also like inside your story and your psychology and understanding why you are who you are and what your family life and your parents and how you were raised and how that made you and how you can kind of explore those things but not be overly personal about it, that you can kind of like find a place for your story to reside in the larger story of human beings and human history. And that's hard to navigate, but I think it makes it more interesting if your work is, if somehow you put your work out there and it says, I'm open, this is come into my world, come into my life for a moment and see what I'm about, or see what my thinking is about, see what my concepts are, and just invite people into that, I think. And the way you do that, I think, is just by really being dedicated to the work. Does that make sense?
My panties are wet.
Okay, great.
So I was trying to think of something really nice to say, but that's where I came. That's where I came out of that.
Okay, that works, I guess.
You're a heart melter, Richard Renaldi. You're really the loveliest guy, and I really prefer people who are like that, and so it's been a real pleasure. And I've got obviously don't have anything to add to that, but that's a really lovely place to bring us to a conclusion. And I think that people should look on your website because there's lots to see there. They could buy the books, they could go to the Robert Murat Gallery in Berlin, or they could go to
Ruby Gallery.
the Ben Ruby Gallery.
They could follow along on my Instagram, Renaldi photos.
Workshop, all those things. Get to know Richard Renaldi Day. Thank you very much to Photo London for giving us this format. If there are voters for the Prix Pictet, Richard Renaldi would be.
Oh, right. There is an audience award. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's right. There's I haven't been super self-promoting that. I don't know why. I feel like
because it's not your nature. That's why.
I'm pretty bad at this.
You're a lovely guy. So thanks for doing this. Spending
I
the
was
time was lovely.
it was nice. I don't know why I was a little nervous before, but I think this went really well. So
Thanks. Bye all. Thank you, Photo London and everybody. And I got a website too, but go to Richard's first. Bye all.
bye bye.
Oh, wait a second. Maybe here's another question.
Oh, it's a thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you, Vanessa.
Okay. Bye bye.